As I have already anticipated, from about the age of 12 my fits of momentary anger also began. Mostly I was angry with those objects that I had so much coddled, defended, dropped with the imagination in my first years of life. When an insult from my father, or unjustified accusation from my mother, reopened a wound, I ran to my makeshift desk and literally killed cases, notebooks, books, toys. I destroyed, tore, broke until I calmed down, and um, at last, light-hearted, I proceeded to calculate with some satisfaction the damage done to my small material patrimony. One day I made the mistake of smashing my father's only birthday present with a hammer, an alarm clock calculator that probably ended up by chance on his skimpy shopping list for us children. When he discovered that crime, he swore on his life that he would never again waste money to give me something, and he kept his word. Of course, today it is easy for me to glimpse in these fits of anger and a desperate cry for help. Sometimes, however, a parent has his eyes blindfolded in the face of the most evident needs of his child. My parents closed there over and over again in the face of my problems, and once upon a time fathers whipped their children for weakness like yours. "Consider yourself lucky that yours never broke your legs," my mother told me proudly in recent years, some of the few times I confronted her with her responsibilities as an educator. Equally proudly, my parents decided I was not fit for life under his own roof. um, under their own roof. Under the insistence of his mother, my father began to grumble during the brief moments we were all together, at lunch and dinner, saying that I disgusted him, that I should go and stay somewhere else, like at my paternal grandparents' home. House. I think my grandmother really thought she was going to be a good mother to me then. Too bad it was an even worse version of my dad. I made it easy for my mother, who finally gave up on my defense from the moment I realized that if I obeyed my father's wishes, my life would change, even for the worse. So I resisted. I was thrown out of the house on every little pretext, and 11 I spent hours and hours on the stairs next to the closed door of the house, with my father, who perhaps hoped that I had decided to ask for lodging with my grandparents. The compromise was that I would spend all the Sundays of my life with them, with my grandparents. To tell the truth, it wasn't too difficult for me to get used to it, because I had grown fond of my grandfather as a kind of second father, and with my grandmother it was always easy for me to maintain a submissive and obedient attitude for no more than 8 hours straight. After the Mass, it became a 30 years tradition to spend an entire day in those nightmare public houses. And a dull anxiety of rebellion was growing inside me. Once I had to run away from home only to go around the block and flee back from the outside world. No one noticed my brief desperate exit, so I had only to resume the anonymous, residual routine of my unwanted life. New guidance. Middle school opened up a new world to me in terms of school education. I no longer had a single teacher who gave us lessons in grammar, mathematics, and science, but an infinite number of different teachers and individual expectations that were difficult to accumulate for a student like me, anxious to excel in everything and with anyone. In short, the tasks doubled. tripled compared to those I was used to, and which also kept me at a study table for full afternoons. So I began to ruin my sight by dint of being hunchbacked in notebooks. I put on myopia glasses, loaded my backpack, backpacks with even greater quantities of textbooks, reduced my leisure time to a minimum in order to always be ready for possible questions. The professor didn't take long to notice their nerd profile. I never struggled to get a sufficiently flattering name from this point of view. I also used my early writing skills to give a fairly clear picture of my family situation through classwork. I must say that I felt an unexpected relief in finally getting rid of a burden and in describing my sorrow for the affective defect of which I believed myself a victim. I also learned that the first aim of an average Italian teacher of any order and grade is to bring home a salary and to work the minimum number of hours possible with a maximum profit. We delegate to them the task of responsibility and great importance, the education and instruction of the new generations. Who tells us they don't get it done as best they can? They simply lack the will and the vocation. One day I wrote in the essay that I had a blind terror of my father, and I was afraid he would end up destroying my life. The teacher was silent and spoke to me in passing only after yet another school family interview. "Your father is such a nice person," she said. "You shouldn't allow yourself to judge him." End of the matter. I never wanted any kind of disagreement with my teachers. Disappointing them would have been worse than a crime to me. I wanted them to testify to me uh, of affection, and to win it there was nothing left to do but to grind and break my back under the weight of the books I trucked around every morning to go to school. The awareness of not being a genius and having to kill myself with fatigue to excel did nothing but spur me on and push me down this one-way street. Either study or a loneliness made up of negative thoughts, insults, abandonment. Only the first few months were difficult. Some teachers were unhappy people, and they did nothing but intimidate me with their visible frustrations and at the teacher's desk. I was always lucky, however, that they didn't hold up and quit their jobs after only a few months of trial. In any case, I have never found a special teacher like Maestro Sabo, even if he had some weak points and not perfectly smoothed out. He alone was alive with a vocation to teach that what is missing in most of the school or Italian school today. Let's talk about my new classmates, the one I had at school when I was 11 to 13. In middle school, we are still children. The weight of life has not yet distorted the infantile plumage, and the artificial world of reason cannot penetrate the bottom of the natural unconsciousness that unites infants with blissful unconscious animals. I was still the first to perceive a substantial underlying affinity with some girls. In a short time they adopted me exactly as had happened in elementary school, and I quite willingly began to frequent the houses of two of them, best friends there, once for the other. I ended up at Georgia's house quite regularly for long afternoon of study since I was 11 years old. I immediately won the sympathies of her father, an old high school teacher, yet another twist of fate just from the high school I joined later, who immediately recognized many aspects of himself as a boy in me. I want to show you something. Are we alike or not? Drops of water, he told me just after our first meeting, putting an old family album under my nose, showing me a picture of him as a boy. Same glasses, same flawless hair with a side row, same serious and little shy air. In a short, for me that was another demonstration of my being destined to a life of confinement between books and dropped into dusty rooms. Let's stop here and see you to the next video.